Marlene Dietrich. It's 1944, and across the crackling airwaves, a voice drifts into the ears of German soldiers. Haunting, familiar, and unmistakably Marlene Dietrich. But this isn't just music, this is psychological warfare. Dietrich, one of Hollywood's brightest stars, worked with the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA, recording German-language tracks designed to break enemy morale. Her melancholic rendition of Lily Marlene played on repeat, stirring homesickness and doubt among Nazi troops. According to the International Spy Museum, these broadcasts were part of a larger OSS effort to encourage desertion and weaken enemy resolve. But Dietrich's wartime contributions didn't stop at propaganda. She traveled with the USO, performing for Allied troops in North Africa, Italy, and even deep into Germany in 1945. The Imperial War Museums document how she often performed under dangerous conditions, sometimes just miles from active combat zones. And then there's the part that sounds straight out of a spy novel. Some accounts suggest Dietrich used her travels as cover to pass messages and supplies to resistance fighters in Nazi-occupied territories. While concrete evidence is scarce, these rumors persist, adding an air of mystery to her wartime efforts. For her service, Dietrich was awarded the U.S. Army's Medal of Freedom in 1947, one of the highest honors given to civilians aiding the war effort. But her defiance came at a cost. In post-war Germany, she was branded a traitor, facing scorn in her homeland for standing against the Nazi regime. Still, she never wavered. "I was born a German, and I am opposed to Hitler and his regime," she once said. "That is enough reason for me to do what I can to defeat them." Josephine Baker. Paris, 1940. The City of Lights had gone dark under Nazi occupation, but in the grand salons and glittering theaters, Josephine Baker remained a luminous figure. To the Germans, she was just an entertainer, an American-born performer who had captivated France for decades. But behind the sequins and silk, she was something far more dangerous, a spy for the French resistance. Baker used her celebrity status as the perfect cover. She mingled at high society gatherings where Axis officials spoke freely, never suspecting the glamorous star was listening intently. With a sharp mind and a knack for discretion, she memorized details about troop movements and military plans, passing them to French intelligence. Some say she had an almost photographic memory, though that remains unverified. What is certain is that her charm and cunning allowed her to gather intelligence in plain sight. Her methods were ingenious. She smuggled messages written in invisible ink on her sheet music, slipping critical intelligence past border checkpoints. She pinned notes inside her undergarments, knowing her fame made thorough searches unlikely. And when she traveled for performances, she wasn't just entertaining. She was transporting secrets across enemy lines. By 1941, Baker had left occupied France for Morocco, where she continued her work for the Free French Forces. From her home in Casablanca, she gathered intelligence, recruited allies, and helped distribute coded messages. Her estate in the Dordogne Château de Milans became a refuge for resistance fighters and Jewish refugees. When Nazi officers came knocking, she reportedly greeted them with warmth and hospitality, distracting them with her charm while ensuring those in hiding remained undetected. Her wartime contributions did not go unnoticed. After the war, France honored her bravery with the Croix de Guerre and the Legion of Honor. Decades later, in 2021, she became the first black woman inducted into the Pantheon, a recognition not just of her artistry, but of her fearless defiance in the face of tyranny. Sterling Hayden. It's 1941, and Hollywood's Sterling Hayden isn't basking in the glow of stardom. He's sailing straight into danger. Recruited by the OSS, the precursor to the CIA, Hayden took on a secret identity, John Hamilton, and plunged into covert missions behind enemy lines. His expertise as a sailor made him the perfect asset for smuggling arms and ferrying Allied operatives through Nazi-occupied Yugoslavia. Working alongside Josip Broz Tito's partisans, the largest resistance force in Europe, he navigated treacherous waters, dodging German patrols and delivering critical supplies. One particularly harrowing mission had him slipping into the Adriatic under cover of night, his vessel packed with weapons destined for the partisans. Some accounts suggest he made landfall on the island of Korčula only to be caught in a sudden German assault. Whether he truly escaped under gunfire remains debated. Official records are scarce, but the danger he faced was undeniable. Hayden's admiration for the partisans ran deep. He later expressed in interviews that their dedication left a lasting mark on him. Some reports claim he even considered renouncing his Hollywood career altogether, disillusioned by the artificial heroism of film. After the war, his brief alignment with the American Communist Party would come back to haunt him during the Red Scare. For his wartime bravery, Hayden received the Silver Star in 1946. But when he returned to Hollywood, the transition was jarring. "This is nuts, but damned, it's pleasant," he once wrote about acting, as if trying to reconcile the thrill of real danger with the illusion of it on screen. Hedy Lamarr. Imagine being one of the most glamorous stars of the 1940s, dazzling audiences on screen while secretly working on military technology that could change the course of war. That was Hedy Lamarr. At the peak of her fame, she wasn't just memorizing scripts, she was inventing. Alongside composer George Antheil, Lamarr co-developed a groundbreaking system called frequency-hopping spread spectrum. The idea? A radio signal that constantly shifted frequencies, making it nearly impossible for enemy forces to jam Allied torpedoes. Inspired by the synchronized rolls of a player piano, their design was patented in 1942. But the US Navy, skeptical of its practicality, initially shelved it. Decades later, that very concept became the backbone of modern wireless communication, paving the way for technologies like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Lamarr, once dismissed as just another Hollywood beauty, had unknowingly helped shape the future of global communication. And while her invention gathered dust in military archives, she didn't sit idle. She threw herself into the war effort, using her star power to sell millions in war bonds and rally support. Recognition for her covert contribution came much later, when she was awarded the Electronic Frontier Foundation's Pioneer Award in 1997. Rumors persist that when she was finally honored, she quipped, "It's about time." Whether she actually said it or not, there's no denying that her brilliance extended far beyond the silver screen. In 2014, she was posthumously inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame, a fitting tribute to a woman whose mind was as sharp as her on-screen presence. Moe Berg. Zurich, December 18, 1944. In a packed lecture hall, a man sat motionless, his gaze locked onto the stage. His name? Moe Berg, former Major League Baseball catcher, now an undercover operative for the OSS, the intelligence agency that would later become the CIA. His mission was as clear as it was dangerous: determine whether Nazi Germany was close to building an atomic bomb. And if the answer was yes, eliminate the man leading the effort. That man was Werner Heisenberg, the world-renowned physicist spearheading Germany's nuclear research. Fluent in German, Berg had slipped into the audience unnoticed, blending in with the crowd of academics. Under his coat, he carried a pistol, a last resort if Heisenberg revealed that Germany was on the brink of nuclear capability. American intelligence feared that if the Nazis got there first, the war could take a catastrophic turn. As Heisenberg spoke, Berg listened intently. The lecture covered theoretical physics, but there was no indication that Germany was anywhere near completing a functional weapon. Berg had to make a split-second decision. If he pulled the trigger, he might change the course of history, but if he was wrong, he would be eliminating one of the most brilliant minds of the era for no reason. In the end, he kept the pistol holstered. Germany's nuclear program was struggling, and Heisenberg, whether by intent or circumstance, was no immediate threat. Berg's intelligence report proved invaluable, reassuring the US that Nazi Germany was far behind in the nuclear race. But his work didn't end there. After the war, he continued his clandestine efforts, working with American intelligence in Europe and beyond. The details of his post-war missions remained shrouded in secrecy, fueling speculation about just how deep his espionage career went. Some believe he played a role in Cold War intelligence gathering, though much of his work remains classified. To the public, he was just a retired ball player, a journeyman catcher whose career spanned 15 seasons. But behind the scenes, Moe Berg had played a far more dangerous game, one where a single mistake could have rewritten history. Julia Child. Imagine Julia Child not in a kitchen perfecting a boeuf bourguignon, but deep in the heart of World War II's intelligence network. Long before she became America's culinary icon, she worked for the Office of Strategic Services, the shadowy predecessor to the CIA. But while many picture spies in trench coats swapping secrets, Child's role was a different kind of covert. She handled classified communications, ensuring sensitive intelligence moved securely through the Allied forces. Her official title? Chief of the OSS Registry. Her job? Managing top-secret documents that passed between high-ranking officials. She wasn't making battlefield decisions, but she had access to some of the war's most classified plans. Some even speculate that she handled materials related to the planned invasion of the Malay Peninsula, though whether she ever saw the full scope of those operations remains unverified. One of the more peculiar projects she was involved in? The development of a shark repellent. The US Navy needed a way to keep sharks from accidentally detonating underwater explosives and the OSS's Emergency Sea Rescue Equipment Section was tasked with finding a solution. While Child worked in an administrative capacity, rumors have long swirled that she played a minor role in coordinating research efforts. The final formula, a copper acetate-based compound, became standard issue for pilots and sailors at risk of being stranded in shark-infested waters. Whether Child herself had a hand in its creation or simply processed the paperwork remains a mystery. Stationed in Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, and later in Kunming, China, Child worked behind the scenes, ensuring intelligence flowed smoothly between Allied forces in the Pacific. She later described her time in the OSS as a lot of fun, recalling how she helped assemble rescue kits and other gear for operatives in the field. Though she never donned a disguise or went undercover, her meticulous work in classified operations played a crucial role in keeping wartime intelligence secure. For decades, her contributions remained buried in classified files. It wasn't until 2008, when OSS records were declassified, that the full extent of her wartime service came to light. Julia Child may have become famous for her mastery of French cuisine, but before she taught America how to cook, she was quietly safeguarding some of the most sensitive secrets of World War II. Noel Coward. Noel Coward was more than just a playwright with a sharp wit. He was a man with a secret. While the world saw him as a globe-trotting entertainer, behind the scenes he was working for British intelligence. His charm and celebrity status made him the perfect operative, allowing him to move through high society without suspicion. During World War II, Coward was recruited by Britain's Secret Intelligence Service under the Z Organization, a covert network led by Colonel Claude Dancy. His mission? Travel under the guise of an entertainer, gathering intelligence from diplomats, politicians, and influential figures. He wasn't sneaking through enemy lines or planting explosives. His weapon was conversation. While Europe was largely off limits due to Nazi occupation, Coward's assignments took him to the United States and the Caribbean, where he subtly gauged political sentiment and reported back to British intelligence. He also played a key role in black propaganda efforts, crafting messages designed to demoralize enemy forces and sway public opinion. Rumors swirled that Nazi officials, unaware of his true allegiance, once considered recruiting him for propaganda broadcasts. While no solid evidence confirms this, Coward himself later joked about how absurdly unconvincing he would have been as a pro-Nazi mouthpiece. Even Winston Churchill reportedly recognized Coward's value, though some accounts suggest he worried the playwright's fame made him too conspicuous for deep cover operations. Whether Churchill personally voiced these concerns remains uncertain, but what is clear is that Coward's intelligence work remained largely classified for decades. When he was finally knighted in 1970, it was for his contributions to drama, not for the years he spent quietly serving his country in ways few would ever know. John Ford. June 4th, 1942. The Battle of Midway was tearing through the Pacific, explosions shaking the sky as Japanese bombers pounded the tiny atoll. And right there, in the thick of it, camera rolling, lens locked on the chaos, stood John Ford. A Hollywood legend, yes, but today, he was a US Navy officer on a mission far beyond filmmaking. Ford wasn't just documenting history, he was gathering intelligence. His footage of Midway wasn't for moviegoers, it was for military strategists, capturing enemy movements, naval formations, and the brutal cost of war, and he paid for it. Shrapnel ripped into his left arm while he filmed, but he never flinched. He kept rolling, capturing the battle in raw, unfiltered detail. But Midway was just one of Ford's wartime assignments. As head of the OSS Field Photographic Branch, he directed top-secret reconnaissance films, including Undercover, a training docudrama teaching OSS agents how to survive behind enemy lines. He even appeared in it himself, playing a naval officer, an eerie mirror to his real-life role. Vice Admiral John D. Bulkley later recalled, "He loved to do that." Ford's work didn't always sit well with military brass. His footage of the Pearl Harbor attack, harrowing, unfiltered devastation, was locked away by the Navy, deemed too controversial for public release. But Ford fought back, re-editing it into December 7th, an 18-minute documentary narrated by Henry Fonda. It won an Oscar, but not before facing heavy censorship. Beyond the camera, Ford made personal sacrifices for the war effort. His own yacht was requisitioned by the Navy for patrol duty off the California coast, and while some whispered that his unit received special treatment, rumors swirled about access to top-tier equipment while others struggled. His defenders argued that his work was vital to both intelligence and morale. Decades later, the full scope of Ford's wartime contributions is still being uncovered. The 2024 documentary Filming Under Fire sheds new light on his OSS unit's intelligence work, revealing how his footage shaped military strategy and preserved history. Steven Spielberg and General Jim Mattis have praised Ford's work, calling it an essential piece of World War II history. John Ford wasn't just a filmmaker. He was a soldier with a camera, risking his life not for box office glory, but for victory. James Stewart. December 1941. Hollywood's biggest stars were rallying behind the war effort, selling bonds, making propaganda films, posing for morale-boosting photos. But James Stewart wasn't interested in playing a soldier on screen. He wanted to be one. And not just any soldier, a combat pilot. At 33, Stewart was already a household name, fresh off an Oscar win for The Philadelphia Story. He could have stayed in Hollywood, making patriotic films like many of his peers. Instead, he walked into an enlistment office. There was just one problem. He was too thin. The Army Air Forces rejected him for being underweight, but Stewart was nothing if not determined. He spent weeks bulking up, stuffing himself with high-calorie meals until he finally hit the required weight. By March 1941, months before Pearl Harbor, he was in uniform. At first, the military wanted to keep him stateside, using his fame to drum up recruits. He starred in Winning Your Wings, a short film encouraging young men to enlist. But Stewart wasn't content with being a poster boy. He pushed for combat duty, and after 2 years of training and persistence, he got his wish. By 1943, he was in England, flying B-24 Liberators over Nazi-occupied Europe. Stewart's missions were brutal. He led bombing raids deep into enemy territory. Factories, rail yards, military installations. The flak was relentless, the losses staggering. On one mission, his squadron lost 13 planes. Over Berlin, his formation was hit so hard that only a fraction of the aircraft made it back. Every time he climbed into the cockpit, he knew the odds of returning were slim. But Stewart wasn't just a pilot, he was a leader. By 1944, he was commanding the 703rd Bomb Squadron, making life or death decisions for the men under him. Every decision he made was going to preserve life or cost lives, a biographer later said, and the weight of those decisions stayed with him long after the war ended. What's less known is that Stewart wasn't just flying bombing runs. He was also involved in classified reconnaissance missions, high-risk flights to assess enemy positions before major operations. These missions were so secret that even decades later, details remain scarce. Some speculate that Stewart's work helped shape key Allied strategies, though official records remain classified. Others whisper about intelligence-gathering flights so dangerous they were scrubbed from official reports. Whether these rumors hold weight or not, one thing is certain. Stewart wasn't just a Hollywood star playing a hero. He lived it. By the time the war ended, Stewart had flown 20 combat missions and earned the Distinguished Flying Cross. He stayed in the Air Force Reserve, eventually rising to the rank of Brigadier General, the highest-ranking Hollywood actor in U.S. military history. But the war changed him. When he returned to Hollywood, he wasn't the same light-hearted actor audiences remembered. His first post-war film, It's a Wonderful Life, took on a darker edge. Friends and colleagues noticed the difference. His performance wasn't just acting. The raw emotion, the haunted look in his eyes, those were real. Some believe the role was his way of processing the trauma he never spoke about. Stewart rarely discussed his wartime experiences. He didn't boast about his medals, didn't seek recognition. But those who served with him knew the truth. He wasn't just a Hollywood star who played heroes, he was one. Roald Dahl. In the early 1940s, before he became a world-famous author, Roald Dahl was a British intelligence officer stationed in Washington, D.C. His mission? To infiltrate elite American social circles and quietly push U.S. policy in favor of Britain during World War II. But instead of disguises and dead drops, Dahl's weapons were charm, wit, and an uncanny ability to befriend or seduce the right people. Dahl had started the war as a Royal Air Force pilot, but a near-fatal crash in Libya left him with severe injuries, forcing him out of combat. Reassigned to British Security Coordination, BSC, a covert intelligence network run by spymaster William Stevenson, codenamed Intrepid, Dahl was tasked with gathering intelligence and influencing key American figures, and he had access to some of the most powerful players in Washington. He struck up friendships with Vice President Henry Wallace and even socialized with future President Harry Truman, but his most infamous connections came from his romantic entanglements. Dahl reportedly had affairs with wealthy and influential women, including Congresswoman Claire Booth Luce, wife of Time magazine founder Henry Luce. Through these relationships, he gained insight into political conversations and steered discussions in Britain's favor. At least that's what some historians suggest. Others argue that while he had access, his actual influence on policy remains uncertain. Dahl himself later admitted his role was delicate, too aggressive, and he risked alienating his contacts, too subtle, and his efforts would be ineffective. At one point, his blunt personality led to his dismissal from his post at the British Embassy, but Stevenson quickly reinstated him, recognizing his value. For decades, Dahl's espionage work remained classified, only coming to light in later biographies like Janet Conant's The Irregulars. The revelations painted a picture of a man who wasn't just a storyteller, but a master of persuasion, using words and relationships as his tools. And while his later books were filled with whimsical adventures, his time and intelligence proved he understood something crucial: the power of influence, whether through a children's book or a whispered conversation in Washington's most exclusive salons. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.